record. I just started recording too. So, oh, there we go. So basically we're going to go over the clinical documentation and ICA notes. So just the objectives of this training, making sure that everyone understands the different types of documentation that are used in behavioral health, making sure that you can recognize the difference between quality documentation and some not so good documentation, increase your confidence in creating clinical documentation. The one thing that we're not going to cover today, just because it is more involved than the time frame we have now, is actually creating and updating treatment plans. That would need to be a whole separate training, but I am going to go over, you know, how to read a treatment plan and things like that. And then basically increase your confidence in navigating through ICA notes. So just really quickly, it would be helpful for me if you could just tell me your name, how many years of experience you have in mental health, your confidence in kind of creating, you know, good quality documentation, whether it be treatment plans or progress notes, discharge summaries, and then just something fun about you. So like I said, my name is Shani Cody. In mental health, I probably have about almost 12 years of experience now. I'm pretty confident in creating documentation, but when I first started out, I was like, I have no idea if I'm doing this correctly. And every place is different. So, you know, my confidence always decreases a little bit when I go to a new place, because I'm like, am I following their format? Am I hitting what my supervisor wants? Things like that. And a fun fact about myself, I used to be a nanny for 3 kids from England, and every now and then I kind of slip into British word use. Not so much anymore because I'm not around them all the time, but you know, I would say something, you know, at my last office and they'd look at me like, what did you just ask me? So I miss them terribly. I haven't seen them because of the pandemic going on, but hopefully I will see them soon. They all have the cutest British accents too, so I definitely miss that. Does anybody want to start sharing?
I can go next.
All right.
I'm Pete. Nice to meet you, Shani. I'm
Nice to
actually
meet
the
you too.
executive director. Finally get to meet you.
Awesome. Yes. Hi.
So my years of experience in the mental health field is kind of like collaborated in education, because I've been in education for over 20 years now, worked in residential settings. More recently, I was an assistant principal in Euclid for the past 2 years, and intervention specialist. So, you know, dealing with students and their mental health issues, and a lot of their parents have, you know, given me a lot of confidence in creating a lot of clinical documentations. Familiar with writing IEPs and 504 plans and taking progress notes. So I'm pretty confident, but I, like you, this is a different field for me. So, you know, making sure that I'm doing it the clinical way. You know, clinical and education can be, you know, different in a lot of areas. So so I'm anxious to, you know, find out more about this. And a fun fact about me is I have a cat phobia.
They're really not that bad. Some of them can be mean,
but yeah,
nice.
Cats and heights. Cats and heights.
Ooh,
are
I don't like heights either. So. No. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Who would like to go next? Anyone?
I can go next.
Okay.
So my name is Dwayne Hurt. I guess if I had to think back, I have probably about 6 years of mental health experience from a mentoring standpoint. Presently, I'm a mentor with Ohio Guidestone, and I attained that position through my education at Case, MSSA degree. And in the process of getting that degree, my field experience was through Ohio Guidestone, and then their student program did a year stint as a mental health specialist at Collinwood High School,
Okay.
and developed a plan there with respects to altering suspension as being the zero tolerance rule of discipline. And so once I finished my education in 2016, I stayed on with Ohio Guidestone as a mentor to young men and teenagers that flow through their foster care department. And so through that thing, I basically guide, mentor them, and also write progress notes on our sessions. So I'm very confident in writing a progress note. Other things like IEPs and treatment plans, I have not had any experience doing those. I know what they are.
Mhm.
I know what they represent. I have not actually done one of them. So
Okay.
very
Awesome.
educational for me, as well as original, to start doing those, as well as I plan to do a lot more in school work as I am sitting for the LSW probably in 3 months.
Okay.
So a fun fact about me is, well, you might not think it's fun, but I'm actually by trade an accountant. So
Okay.
that's my first love, will always be. So I'm a 9 to 5er. I am a general ledger accountant and payroll administrator at CEOGC, which
Okay.
is awesome because that's going to help me collab my social work experience and add that to my career.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love to crunch numbers by day, and in the evenings I try to develop some thinking mechanisms, some change of thought in young men at night. So that's me.
Awesome. Awesome.
And
Well,
I also
welcome.
want to thank Pete for the opportunity to be involved in what I think is collectively going to be a great organization to help the change in our young men, whether it be from a standpoint of just character or even as far as changing their lives. So thanks, Pete. I appreciate it, brother.
Oh no, thank you. I appreciate you as well.
All right. I want to say that at one point, let me see if she's still in here. Tiffany, you had raised your hand on the thing. Do you want to share next? She disappeared?
If you can hear.
Yep. All right.
I'm here.
Oh,
Can you hear
okay.
me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tiffany. I'm happy to be on board with Peter James' development and the skills that I think I can bring to the organization. I do have previous studies in the social work, mental health field. I currently am employed through a medical health insurance company, so I am familiar with diagnosis of mental health, some of the characteristics that are associated with individuals who have mental health concerns. I've previously worked in the home health industry, so some of the clients that I interact with on a daily basis did have mental health concerns, in which part of my job duties require me to chart those day-to-day activities and the interaction that I had with them while being or caring for them.
Okay.
I had an audio problem earlier, so I'm not completely clear on the questions that were all asked, but I think you asked a phobia.
Oh no, that was my fault. It was
Oh.
That was your input. Okay.
I didn't
No.
finish on no training off. No, a fun fact about yourself.
Okay, a fun fact. I love working with people. I love just meeting new people, learning about them, learning about what their interests are, what troubles they may be dealing with, and maybe sharing some of my experience or any helpful hints that I can give to them to make their day different. You know, when dealing with individuals in a mental health state, you don't always realize the small interactions that you have with them, how it can change their day or their whole perception on life, period. So
Absolutely.
I'm excited to learn more and being a part of the organization and, just coming on board and learning what is necessary for the position.
And then
Awesome.
also Tiffany works at my group home. We have 3 group homes currently that
Okay.
serve mental health patients. So she works at the one in Akron. So she's been doing a really good job of building relationships with those guys, and those, they can be challenging. So she's been doing good.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I'll go, Shawnee.
Okay.
Donald.
Hey, DJ.
Hello, everyone. How you guys doing?
Good.
I forgot the question so already. All right, my name is Donald Henderson. I've been in the mental health field directly. It's going on my 3rd year, but like Pete was saying, I was working in education for like 12 or 13 years, maybe 14 years if you count like tutoring and working with like SPED students in undergrad. Pretty much serving the youth or just teaching or just assisting with servicing, whether it be through education or sports or just transitioning in different ways in life, helping the youth or people in general is my passion.
Oh. Can't hear you, DJ.
You muted yourself.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you muted yourself, DJ. See if I can unmute.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, now
I don't know where I left off at. Where I leave off at. I'll start over. I can go fast.
Okay.
All right, my name is Donald Henderson. I've been in the mental health field directly about 3 years. But if you like Pete, if you count my education background, maybe about 12 to 14 years. If you add in my undergrad, while I was tutoring and just working with students. Then started teaching right out the gate and working with SPED students. I wasn't directly a SPED teacher, but I was still assisting with SPED classes. Then I went back and got a couple master's degrees. My confidence in writing quality notes. I'm confident in writing, very confident in writing actually, but I'm always looking to get better. So that's why, it's good that we're having this training, learning more about the golden thread, because it seems like things are always changing. So it's good to have these trainings. So yeah, but I've written quality notes before. I've trained also on how to write notes. And one fun thing about myself, I love to write and publish children's books.
All right, thank you. All right.
In San Francisco.
Next, I'll start calling on people if
I'll
okay,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Good.
All right, my name is Samuel Kistner. Years of experience, kind of like Pete and Donald. I've worked in education. I've been a high school teacher. I've been an administrator, dean of students, assistant principal. But formally, probably the last 4 years, just in grad school, working within the mental health field. In terms of my confidence level, I'm pretty confident. I'm actually in field work right now, and I've got about less than 2.5 weeks and I graduate. And so,
Yay.
Yeah. So that's my fun fact. But I've been seeing clients, I've been seeing families, couples, individuals, groups. And so as far as our reporting, we use counsel. And so it's not exactly the same, but it's very similar to ICANOS. And so I'm pretty confident about, using the correct language, my diagnosis, my treatment planning. But like Donald said, I'm always looking to improve. And so I'm a student for life. And so this is a great opportunity. I'm blessed that Pete's included me in this. And so I'm glad I get a chance to learn another database entry, because I'm definitely looking to start my own practice. And so I want to find the best, application, for reporting and billing stuff. And so again, this is another opportunity for me to learn and improve my skill set. So again, I'm definitely confident, but I'm always looking to learn to get better. So that's pretty much about me. I told you my fun fact. I got about less than, I'm done. And then I will take my state test.
Congratulations.
Yay! So that's it.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. And who's next? Anyone? I'll start calling on people if we don't get volunteers. I know it's still kind of early. Maybe y'all haven't gotten your coffee in yet or something, but
Hi, I'll go next.
okay.
My name is Shawnee.
Yay.
And I will start with the fun fact because I don't normally meet people with that name, and I've never seen it spelled how you have yours spelled. And most of the time when people call themselves Shawnee, it's usually a nickname for them. It's not their real name. So just starting with that. And if you didn't know, it means marvelous in Swahili.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. So
the spelling of my name, do. I don't know about yours.
I'll go with that. Sure.
Right. So anyway, my name is Shawnee. I have about 9 years of experience in mental health, but I have not been in that field for the last 5 years, and all of my experience with mental health was with adults. Primarily for about 7 of those 9 years, I worked with individuals coming out of prison, acclimating them back into the community. And I did that for the last 7 years that I did work with mental health. Now I'm currently at the county as an eligibility specialist, determining eligibility for food stamps and medical. I've been doing that for the last 5 years. And prior to that, I haven't worked with children in about 14 years since I worked at the county the first time at Children Family Services. So as far as my confidence in quality clinical documentation, because I did it for so long, I was confident at that time, but since it's been about 5 years since I've done it, I am not confident at all right now because I know there's a lot of changes and things are a lot different than they were back then. So I'm just looking forward to learning how to do good notes and working with you guys.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Thank you. All right. Next. Anyone?
I'll go.
Oh, okay.
You ready? Okay.
Yeah, and then I'll come to you after Dania.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dania. No, ladies first. Go ahead.
Now, I was just trying to jump in before my dog started barking. So my name is Dania Martin. Years of experience in mental health. So I have 3 years from a clinical standpoint, but I was a behavioral specialist in a charter school for about 5 years. I guess I would say 8 years total. My confidence level in creating quality clinical documentation. Well, I would say that I'm pretty confident since Shawnee, you taught me. So yeah, I'll say, but you know, there's always room to learn. So I'll say on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably at a 7. A fun fact about myself, I just got approved for my nonprofit, IRS, for transitional housing for the working class individuals. So I partner with the United Way, and they're going to provide personal finance coaches for each family to help bridge the gap between the working class and, you know, those that are up there in the higher tax bracket. So
wonderful. That's awesome. Definitely a much needed service. So
Congratulations.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Alex, did you want to go next?
Sure, I'll go ahead. Hey, everybody, what's going on? Hope everyone's feeling good, staying safe. Alex Lewis is the name. I've been in mental health for about 10 years now. I guess I have a couple fun facts. One fun fact, appreciate you, Pete. Obviously, just as a couple echo, bringing me on. Used to work with Pete. We go back. The man put out a plan a long time ago and said what he's going to do, and obviously we're all here and it's coming to fruition. So nothing but respect for that man. I've been in, like I said, mental health for about 10 years. Kind of like, I forget who it was, but the accountant. I have more of a background degree, you know, more of a business background, I should say. Excuse me. But for the past 10 years, I've been in education. Anywhere from residential, starting in residential, then moved on to a school with working with special ed students with mental health, a lot of autism background. I've been a teacher at the Monarch School for Autism for the past 8 years, I believe, is going on now. Yeah, about 8 years, 9 years, excuse me. I love it. It's challenging. Familiar with, don't have my BCBA, but that's in the works here. But I have a lot of behavior background. Working with a lot of different children with various behaviors, a lot of ABA methods and various other methods I'm familiar with. As far as the quality clinical documentation, not so familiar with it, to be totally honest. Haven't had to. I've done some home health aid over the years and past, just to help families out to where, certain families ran into issues, whether their students were at school, and obviously I've had relationship with them, so I've kind of gotten like special vouchers to, work in a school setting, but then also help out in a home setting. Another fun fact for me, might turn some of you off. I'm a diehard Steelers fan. Don't know if you can see my man cave behind me, but it's all over. I'm not gonna give you a tour today. Take a lot of money from you guys every year who think the Browns are gonna come through each year. But back to as far as like the education thing, and far as the mental health aspect, I do some mentoring on the weekends as well. Well, at least I used to. Haven't for the past year. Took a break, but I used to do a lot of mentoring, just getting, young Black youth out in the community, whether it's just taking them out to the mall, those who can't get around to different places, whether it's just, playing sports with them and really just trying to talk life into them. So many of our youth just have, issues with trust, issues with just belief, hope, anything, so obviously we all know, think that we do, it's always good for young Black men and women to see folks that look like them, in different positions and are able to articulate different things. So that's just pretty much me in a nutshell. Again, not so confident as far as when it comes to the documentation of things. You give me IEPs are a little different, but again, that's like, the difference between clinical and education, I'm a little more confident in that, but that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Did I miss anybody? I don't think I did. I don't think I did. Okay. Well, it sounds like, we have a variety of backgrounds kind of coming in and on this training right now. So the biggest thing too that I hear from people who are kind of coming from different backgrounds and have done different types of charting is how writing notes for behavioral health care is a lot different than, maybe home health care or, things like that. Like writing an IEP, for example, is it's similar to a treatment plan, but not quite the same. So once we actually kind of look at a document, you'll probably look at it and say, oh, this looks kind of a little bit like an IEP and things like that. But there will be some differences. And like I said, feel free to, jump in if you do have a question about something as we, kind of go on. So, all right, so we had some, let's see if we can get my PowerPoint back there okay. So like I said, the very first thing we're going to talk about is just clinical documentation. And there are several different types of documentation that are important in behavioral health. So the very first one is your mental health assessment. Some agencies call it a diagnostic assessment, just a plain old assessment, a DA, an MHA, whatever you want to call it. But that gives you the foundation of the client that you're working with. It's going to tell you about why they're seeking services, what their current symptoms are, what their goals are, what their background is, and kind of give you an idea as to who they are as a person from more of a clinical standpoint. Your individualized service plan, that's a treatment plan. Some people will call it the ISP, a treatment plan. whatever you guys want to call it. Most people just call it a treatment plan. You've got your progress notes. Those are kind of the meat of a client's chart. And you're going to be writing a progress note for every interaction that you have with a client. And the progress notes are actually how the agency gets paid. Those are the billing is always attached to your progress note. And then your discharge summary, that's basically a general summation of everything that the client has done, the services they've received while, you know, at the agency and things like that. And the discharge summary also will always need to include just a list of resources that a client can access if they, you know, need further services and for some reason don't want to come back to the agency. And one nice thing about Icon Notes is you can create, and I'll get into this more, but you can create custom buttons. So instead of typing out a list of referrals to give to a client, you can just type it up once as a button, and then if you ever need to do a discharge, all you do is click that button and boom, it appears. So that's really nice. And just again, a reminder that all documentation is considered a legal document. It can be subpoenaed in court. A client can get a copy of their record whenever they want. So just be mindful of also what you're writing and how you're writing things too. And you want to make sure that, you know, you're using proper spelling and grammar and things like that. I always tell the story. I was in actually a juvenile court with a client once, and the judge was like looking at some progress notes from a different agency, and I could tell she was just like, I can't understand what this person is saying because their spelling was so off and their grammar was terrible. And I was like, oh, I'm glad it wasn't me, because I am, and Icon Notes should have like a spell check feature and things like that too. So I know not everybody's a great speller, and that's totally fine. So why is good documentation so important? It's imperative when you are working with clients. It's proof that sessions with clients actually occurred, number one, and it's a record of how the client is progressing in treatment. Poorly kept documentation doesn't allow clinicians to determine the appropriate level of care for a client, any future treatment needs, again, or their progress. You know, if for some reason you were working with a client and, you know, you had a major surgery and you were out for 4 weeks, you know, you might want another case manager to pop in and check in on your client. You know, they've got to be able to understand your notes and understand what you were doing with them to continue to provide that quality care. Again, maybe subpoenaed in court. Clients might want a copy of their treatment record, and again, it allows for reimbursement from their insurance companies. So I believe it was DJ that mentioned this at one point when we were doing introductions, but there is something called the golden thread in clinical documentation. And basically the golden thread consists of the major types of documentation that I had mentioned before: the assessment, treatment plan, your progress notes, and your discharge summary. And as you'll see, the golden thread, again, it begins with the assessment. So it is identifying all of the needs that the client has in treatment. And then it'll incorporate the treatment plan, which gives the goals and the interventions that you as a clinician will be doing. And then it will finally incorporate the progress notes. So the effort that the client that's putting in, services provided, any referrals that you have made. And it's called the golden thread because if you're following it accurately, each documentation is tying together. So your treatment plan is derived from your mental health assessment. Your progress notes should follow right behind your treatment plan. And that is a huge thing. That is one of the major things that insurance companies are going to look for if they ever do come in and do an audit. They want to see that the services that you're providing and writing about matches what's in the treatment plan. And, you know, in some of my past roles doing chart audits and things, the major thing that I found was that people were writing progress notes and doing, working on interventions and goals and things like that that were nowhere in the treatment plan, which is a huge no-no. Anything, and we'll, like I said, we'll cover it as we kind of move further into talking about documentation, but basically if it's not in the treatment plan, you can't do it. And the nice thing about ICA Notes as well is that while it does have preset interventions and things like that, you can add your own, you can make them completely customizable to the client. So there should never be an excuse of, oh, I couldn't do this with the client because it wasn't in the treatment planner. All right. Medicaid will look at you and be like, yeah, okay, give us that money back, sorry. Which we don't want to do. That's 100% the thing that we want to avoid. And also each piece of documentation that you have should flow logically from one to another too. So, you know, I'm an auditor, I come in, I need to understand, okay, this is why, you know, Dania did that intervention with the client, kind of a thing. Oh, I see it in the treatment plan, and oh, I see that was a symptom in the mental health assessment as well. And the other thing too that the treatment plan needs to do along with the assessment is establish medical necessity. Why is it necessary for this client to receive these services? You know, and that again is generally done in the mental health assessment itself, but as we'll see when we look at a treatment plan, it's going to be in the treatment plan as well. And the other thing too is progress notes are always going to lead to the treatment plan review and update, which will again lead to more progress notes and things like that. We'll talk a little bit about treatment plan reviews and things like that, but you know, just know that you can do a treatment plan review whenever. You don't need to wait for, you know, oh, the 3-month mark or a 6-month mark. If something is going on with the client that necessitates a change in the type of services that they're receiving or the frequency of services, you know, you need to update the treatment plan to reflect that. And then finally, the discharge summary is going to tie everything together. I'm not going to talk too much about it, the discharge summaries right now, since, you know, everyone's just kind of starting out with their clients, but I will kind of just touch base a little bit on that. So some more clinical documentation. So in order for a client to receive services, they need to have a mental health assessment. And the assessment is going to be providing information about the presenting problems and symptoms, why the client is seeking treatment, their social and developmental history, trauma history, health history, even some information about, if available, I guess, mom's pregnancy history, if there were any complications there, because that, you know, especially people who have worked in education, you know, a lot of developmental issues are almost developed in utero as well. And then finally, the client's goals. You know, an assessment should always include, you know, what the client wants to get out of treatment. So from all of that information, a diagnosis is formulated, and this is always going to be done by a licensed professional, so a counselor, social worker, psychiatric nurse, things like that. And it's imperative that you read the assessment before you start working with a client so that you can understand their background and their needs. You know, you may know the clients that you have brought on, you may, you know, have even referred them, but sometimes, you know, they'll tell something to an assessor that maybe they won't tell you, or, you know, they might tell you something and leave that completely out of the, you know, assessment, and you're reading it and you're like, okay, why didn't they mention X, Y, and Z? I know that's an issue. So, you know, it's definitely essential that you guys read that assessment before, you start working with a client. So I just kind of, it's a little bit hard to see, but like the graphic is basically just all of the things that make up the mental health assessment that I was just talking about, the symptoms, health and mental health history, family mental health history. You know, a lot of this stuff is hereditary as well. And then even a mental status exam, like what state is the client in at the time of the assessment. So from that, you've got the individualized service plan or treatment plan. So your treatment plan has to have goals for all of the problems that are identified in the mental health assessment. And it needs to contain a goal for all of the diagnosed mental health issues that the assessor has found. So if a client has been diagnosed with depression and anxiety, you're going to have two kind of goals that you'll be working on in the treatment plan. That's kind of how iKnote sets that up. And again, it'll make a little bit more sense when we actually look at a treatment plan. So I can kind of refer and show you what that is. But the only way too that you would not be working on something that is identified in an assessment would be, you know, if a client's like, you know, I don't want to work on that right now, and that is something that would be documented in the mental health assessment. You know, the assessor will have everyone has a different way of writing it, but it might say something like, you know, client declines to work on their substance abuse issues right now and prefer to focus on their anxiety, or, you know, something like that. So the treatment plan itself is a working document. It is updated periodically. It's minimally every 6 months to reflect any changes in the client's life, the progress they're making, things like that. But like I said, it should absolutely be updated sooner if there is like a major life event that can cause the client's symptoms to increase. So, you know, a divorce, job loss, a serious accident, new baby, things like that. Always a good time to sit down and review a client's treatment plan with them to make sure that you're hitting all of the symptoms that they're experiencing at that time. So the treatment plan too is the blueprint of the services that the client is going to be receiving. The treatment plan is going to tell us how often the client is being seen, who's providing the services, and even, you know, how long the services are going to last. And the treatment plan too is always going to include input from the client. So when you do a treatment plan review, it's always going to be with the client. And the treatment plan lays out the client's regimen of treatment, and it's going to allow us to get paid. So if a treatment plan's missing, it's incomplete, whatever, you know, you might have to pay that money back. And legally, you need to keep your treatment plan up to date. You can't bill on an outdated treatment plan. iKnote does have a feature where you can actually run a report and see when clients' treatment plans are coming due. So as long as, and there's a catch to that, you have to make sure that the date is correct on the treatment plan that you write for it to be correct in the report. But that is one that is really helpful if you're like, you know, gosh, I can't remember when Susie Q's treatment plan is due. Is it, I know it's due in August, but is it the first or the second week? You can run that report and it will tell you. So there are different components of a treatment plan. The basic components are long-term goals, short-term goals, and interventions. So each identified problem should only have like one long-term goal. You don't want to overwhelm the client with 4 or 5 long-term goals. And your long-term goal is a very broad kind of overarching goal. So it might be something like client will reduce symptoms of anxiety to improve daily functioning. You know, that is an example of a long-term goal. That's not something that they're gonna be like, boom, done next week, we're done, treatment's over. No, that might take a year to get there. And you need to include what are called target and completion dates. So we know when we need to refer back to the treatment plan to do an update. So your target date is always going to be 6 months from when that treatment plan is created. So it's going to be that first treatment plan review. And your completion date is always a year from the development of the treatment plan. Ideally, the client would have met that long-term goal within a year of starting services. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But you know, when you are sitting with a client to review the goals, then you know that is the time to look at changing a long-term goal if necessary. If you're like, you know, I just don't think I'm going to get there, try to find another goal that they are going to hit.
I have a quick
Yes.
question. Where is there like a bank or somewhere? I know like when we used to write IEP goals, there was like a bank or certain different goals that you can choose from. And I can notice, is there like a section in there that can
Yep.
give them options on different goals to pick?
Yep, absolutely. And that's something that we'll look at when we actually get into Notes. The nice thing is that Notes breaks it up by diagnosis. So you can have a whole bunch of long-term goals to choose from, but they're all going to be related to anxiety, or they're all going to be related to depression or something like that. So there are several different ones that you can choose from, but you don't have to like go searching for them. They're all going to be, you know, anxiety's on the anxiety tab, depression's on the depression tab, and things like that. So
Right,
definitely.
because it has to be, because you have to have one long-term goal to identify with anxiety. So that problem, then there's goals underneath there for each
Right.
goal. Okay.
And as you'll see too on the next slide, under the long-term goals, you're going to have short-term goals. So that is what the client is going to be working on regularly. So both within sessions with you and outside of sessions. And you know, you need at least one short-term goal. I always suggest having 2 to 3, because the fewer short-term goals you have, the fewer interventions you're going to have, and then the less variety you're going to have. And I can tell you that no client wants to sit down and journal every single session. They'll be like, they're going to be like, why is this client just not answering my phone calls to schedule? Well, they probably don't want to journal again this week, Karen. That's, you know, that could be something. So, you know, if the client has, you know, several things that they want to accomplish for their anxiety, instead of giving them 3 long-term goals, give them 3 short-term goals. And we'll see too when we actually look at the treatment planner and the example of a treatment plan itself. It's broken up that way so that, you know, you can end a short-term goal, for example, if it's not working for the client, without having to end a whole long-term goal and restarting and redoing the entire treatment plan. So it's quite helpful to have, like I said, 2 to 3 short-term goals. And the one thing too that I've actually done in Notes has been created some custom short-term goals for the agency. So for example, TBS services are not something that is automatically in Notes. So there is already a custom short-term goal in Notes for any client who is going to be receiving TBS services. And then things like referring a client out for, you know, maybe a psychiatric evaluation. So that's in the treatment planner, but it didn't sound right, if that makes sense. And the nice thing too with goals as opposed to interventions is, as we'll see when we look at treatment plans, you can have a short-term goal as plans to start soon, which means that, you know, at some point the client may have expressed interest in it, but they're not ready for it just yet. Or like, let's say that, I don't know, like Alex has a client, and in their assessment, they have expressed that, you know, they might need some extra support. So they're like, okay, let's add a TBS worker or something like that. But they want to see, you know, how they do for the first 3 months with just a case manager. You can add the TBS goal to the treatment plan, but not activate it yet. So that way, when the client is ready for the TBS worker, all you have to do is go in and do an update of and switch it to working on, which means that now the service is active, as opposed to sitting there and going, okay, I need to, you know, add this intervention in here. It just makes it go a lot faster.
Right.
And that also gives a bigger picture of all of the services that are offered at the agency as well, that the client is able to take part in.
Could you briefly explain the difference, just so everyone is clear on the goal versus the intervention?
So, and I think the intervention is actually my next slide, but so basically a goal is something that the client is actually going to be working on. So the client is going to be doing this in session with the case manager, TBS worker, psychiatrist, whoever, and then an intervention, which is the next one, is what the clinician is doing for the client to assist them in accomplishing their goal.
Right.
So again, I suggest having 2 to 3 interventions per short-term goal. Notes does not necessarily always have 2 or 3 that it suggests, but that will also give you, again, a variety of interventions to do for a certain short-term goal. And your interventions need to make sense when you are adding them to short-term goals. And again, when I was doing chart audits, I would look at some of the interventions and I'm like, what, how does this even go with this? Because I think I read one once that was like, you know, client will show an improvement in school performance, and the intervention was, you know, QMHS will make a psych eval referral. And I'm like, I mean, I can kind of get there, but there were several steps that I had to hit. I was like, okay, well, maybe they have ADHD and they, you know, need medication, but that's not where I would have gone immediately. So making sure that your interventions make sense in Notes. And I know where a lot of people go wrong when they are doing a treatment plan in Notes and adding intervention. So like I said, I'll touch kind of briefly on it because treatment plan updates are a whole nother beast, and that's a whole separate training. But you know, just know that your interventions need to be appropriate for your short-term goals and your long-term goals, really. And you're always going to want to include an intervention for linkage to community resources. So this is going to allow you to help clients get to, you know, job and family services, food banks, doctor's appointments, all of that. And that is actually, I did a custom intervention and short-term goal for that in Notes as well. And it's in Notes already, but the way it was written didn't feel right. And basically it says that, you know, the case manager is going to assist them in to get to all of their appointments, and it allows for phone calls or face-to-face visits, because, you know, you are going to be making phone calls on behalf of clients that are billable. So there is that.
I had a question.
Yes.
I want to throw this out, and I want you to evaluate it, because this is something I've been kind of dealing with one of my young men. And so I kind of drew this thing up. So the long-term goal in this situation would be to reduce his anxiety and strengthen his confidence in counting money and shopping on his own.
Okay.
So one of the short-term goals there was to strengthen his math skills, particularly subtraction as it comes to understanding what kind of change he should get back. So then one of the interventions that I ran with him was we collectively drew up like a counting calendar, if you will. Had a lot of different scenarios on it when it comes to making purchases. And once we collaboratively put that together, one of his assignments was to review that 3 times a week for an hour at a time.
Okay.
So I want to know if that makes sense as it comes to long-term goal, short-term goal, and intervention.
It makes sense to me. So yeah, it does. And as well, the only thing that I would suggest would be to not necessarily put such a strict time limit on it, and this would be for anything. And we'll when we look at an example of a treatment plan, I'll tell you why. If you kind of pigeonhole yourself into, I'm going to meet with a client for, 3 times a week for 60 minutes, what happens if you go over? Or what happens if you go under? That kind of thing.
Well, that wasn't the meeting. That was his assignment as far as getting to the long goal. He was to sit and each week, 3 days a week, he's to review and study this calendar for an hour a day.
Right, but what if he doesn't do it for an hour? That's kind of where I'm going with that. So what you could do is remove the hour and just say, client will review, and that itself is more of a short-term goal. The intervention would actually be, you doing something with the client, like, case manager will review accounting calendar with client 3 times per week, kind of a thing.
So so that's the intervention.
Right.
So then you're saying don't put a time limit on when he has to study, just make it within the short-term goal. That part of the short-term goal is that he does study.
Right. And I think too, once we actually take a look at a treatment plan, it'll make more sense. What I'm saying too. So
I appreciate the feedback.
No problem. That'll be like our next chunk here shortly.
Okay, great.
So the other thing that is going to be extremely important with treatment planning is a signature page. And a signature page is basically proof that you as the case manager reviewed the treatment plan with the client and they agree with it. So you need to have a treatment plan signature page for every review that you do with the client. For every treatment plan that is in ICANotes, there needs to be a signature page that goes along with it. The nice thing is that you can do that electronically in ICANotes. So you don't need to worry about having papers and losing it and scanning things in. You can do it right there in ICANotes, and I will show you how to do that as well. If a client is under 18, their parent or guardian has to also sign the treatment plan review, no exceptions. And the same thing is if they are in custody of someone other than their parents, the appropriate custodian needs to also sign that treatment plan. And if a client is in custody of someone other than, a parental unit, there should already be paperwork from back when the assessment was done, because whoever has custody of them would have needed to give permission to have the assessment completed as well. So just make sure that, whoever has custody of someone is the one that is signing the treatment plan signature page as well. I often get the question, well, if a client's like 6 years old, do they have to sign a treatment plan? I'd suggest it. If they can write their name, then, they can sign the treatment plan. But really, once kids are, 10 and up, they should definitely be signing that treatment plan as well. I always, when I worked with, younger kids, I used to explain the treatment plan to them in terms like, we're going to work on some things so that you stop getting into trouble in your classroom, and we're going to do fun things like read stories and blah, 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 blah. How does that sound? cool, that sounds great, Miss Shawnee. Okay, sign this kind of a thing. So, you know, with the younger kids, you're going to have to explain things a little bit differently, but, you know, they can certainly sign the signature pages as well. Does anybody have any questions about treatment plans before I pop into progress notes? And just keep in mind too that we are going to actually go into ICA notes and look at treatment plans and an example of a treatment plan as well. So your question may also be answered a little bit later. No? Okay. So progress notes. Again, your progress notes have to be related back to the treatment plan. So think about that golden thread that we talked about earlier. As I said earlier too, some notes are talking about interventions that are nowhere in the treatment plan. Not okay. Make sure whatever you are doing with the client as an intervention is in the treatment plan. And to be clear too, as we'll see when we look at a sample treatment plan, the interventions are still broad enough that you have a lot of freedom in creativity and how you accomplish an intervention with the client. So for example, I know I've almost have the treatment planner in ICA notes memorized, which is sad. That's how many treatment plans I've written in my life. But you know, I know that one of the interventions says something like, QMHS will provide psychoeducation to client regarding anxiety. It's not telling you how you're providing that psychoeducation. So you could use worksheets, you could, you know, have a client make up a song about anxiety symptoms, you could show them a YouTube video that's educational. So there's still a lot of creativity and freedom in how you do the intervention. It's just saying what you're doing as an intervention. So it's that I think is really nice as well about the treatment planner that's already in there. Make sure that you are using good judgment about what is included in your progress note, because again, they're legal documents. So, you know, if a client is in a terrible mood one day when you go visit them, you probably don't want to write in your session, you know, client appeared to be a total witch today during session, that, you know, client was irritable. Boom, you know, you're saying the same thing, it's just a little bit nicer. So, and then you never, ever, ever, ever want to copy and paste progress notes. Your progress note should be individualized to that session each and every time. You may get some repeats, but I should never be able to print off a note, hold it up to the light, and see that they are exactly the same. I have worked with people who have been fired because they have copied and pasted progress notes. And really, you're doing the client a disservice as well, because you're not actually talking about the progress that they're making. You know, when I was reviewing progress notes, progress notes for a chart audit that I was doing recently, I was watching a case manager write about how they were going up to the school and talking to the teachers and things like that. And I'm like, well, what planet are you on? Because all of these schools are shut down because of COVID. So y'all must be in another country or on another planet, because there ain't no schools in Cleveland that are open. So, you know, that was well, let me talk to the supervisor and have you get your kid, because this is not working out real well. So please don't copy and paste your progress notes. Don't do it. Again, each agency is different in terms of their policy on, you know, discipline and things like that. But I would say pretty much every agency is going to give you a warning and then say bye, like stop copying and pasting your progress notes. We don't want you to work for us, kind of a thing. So please be mindful. Okay. All right, so progress notes in general are going to include a summary of the intervention that you provided for the client. the client's response to the intervention, and what you plan on doing in future sessions with the client. You're also going to want to give a description of, the client's physical appearance and mood, because that can also tell a lot about the client's mental state. A client could be like, I'm fine, I'm not depressed at all, and they're wearing like the same pajamas you saw them in 3 days ago, and they're stained and their hair's all over the place, and you're like, are you sure you're really fine? I don't think you're really fine, kind of a thing. So just a brief description on that. And I will say too, like, writing progress notes might seem difficult at first, but as you practice, as you get guidance from your supervisor, as you find your own voice, they're going to get a lot simpler. I remember like the first progress note I ever sat down and tried to write, I think it took me like an hour because I was overthinking it. Now I can write a progress note from when I like physically put the information into Notes to signing it, 10 minutes. So you'll get a lot quicker. So some sample language, like I said, this is just a sampling. There are so many different words you can use. So these would be examples of interventions that you've done with the client. You assessed, you referred, explored, reframed, interpreted, you discussed, you listed. So any kind of like ED verb that you would think of that's kind of how I look at it, back to 3rd grade. That is an example of an intervention. So I guess I will ask you, like, Pete, do you require like a certain number of interventions, quote unquote, in a note or anything like that?
We haven't gotten that far, but
Okay.
What do you recommend? What do you recommend? What's been your take on it?
So it depends on how long you're seeing the client. So if you are spending on average an hour and a half with the client, like, since you have 3 hours a week, most people tend to break that into 2 visits a week or something like that, or
Right.
like the intense clients, whatever. It's also going to depend on what you're working on. I would say anywhere from 3 to 5. But again, it depends on what you're working on. And I do have a couple of sample notes that we're going to look at too. So, you could use like 7 different interventions in a progress note, but you also need to make sure that they all fit together. You don't just want to throw in, supported client or arrange this or whatever and have it not make sense with what you're saying. So, you obviously need, I would say, at least 2, but there's not necessarily an upper limit. Yeah.
Right. And I think maybe as we go and I talk with Derek as we start to review the notes, and that would be something that we can come up with more.
Okay.
But just listening to what you were saying, I'm thinking around 3 to 4.
Yeah, I've found that's generally pretty average.
Right, that's what I'm seeing.
I've worked at places where it's like you need to have 5 interventions, and people just start throwing stuff in there.
And one thing I don't want to do, Shani, and I've been at work for places that they tell you have to do it like this, and you have to do, the reason why I stepped away from education is, I want to be more flexible. So I still want to make sure that we aren't just willy-nilly just doing anything. But, I don't want to put people in a box and then people feel nervous that they didn't do this and they didn't do that. I want it to be the most authentic that it can be and the most real that it can be, because that's the way we're helping our clients. So
right. So yeah, I would say you'll probably need at least 2, but there's not necessarily going to be, a maximum of this, or you need to have this. So
it depends on case by case basis and what you're doing with that client on that day. And if you're being honest and truthful, it'll just naturally come out, and you'll have 2 or 3 in there. So
absolutely, you are correct. So again, your basic components of a progress note, just your intervention, what you did and why you did this intervention. So it's great that you may have assisted your client to the grocery store. Why did you do it? Like, why can a client not do it on their own? You know, QMHS assisted client to the grocery store to shop for food as clients' anxiety symptoms are so severe that they can't even walk in the doors without having a panic attack. You know, I write it a little bit differently, but that's basically why you were taking the client to the grocery store. Or, you know, assisted client in purchasing food because they can't stick to a budget and they spend their food stamps for the month in one shopping trip, and then they're stuck for the rest of the month. That's why you took them grocery shopping. So the client, you're going to give, again, just a brief description of their mood and their appearance and how they reacted to the intervention. And if you can stick like a direct quote from a client into a progress note, insurance companies love that, do that. So if a client was just like, well, this is crap, I never want to do it again, you can throw that in there into, you know, a progress note. But, you know, if you have a client that said, you know, okay, now I understand the importance of, you know, needing to budget, you might want to stick that in there too, because that's showing clients progress. And then for your follow-up, just plans for the near future. It might be, you know, QMHS will meet with client next week to continue discussing coping skills. QMHS will continue to support client in goal achievement with a session next week, you know, something like that. It doesn't have to be, you know, case manager is meeting with client next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. That, you know, that you don't have to do that. You can, but you don't have to. As I was saying earlier about the discharge summaries, so once a client has met their goals as outlined in the treatment plan, they need to be discharged from services. So a discharge summary is going to have the following: why they were referred for treatment, the progress that they made in treatment or didn't make, any recommendations for further treatment, as well as symptoms that they should be watching out for that might indicate a need for additional services, and then a list of agencies in the area where the client can seek any additional services if they don't want to return to the agency. And you also want to complete a discharge summary for clients who never returned for services after their initial assessment, and anybody who just kind of fell off the face of the earth and stopped responding to you as their case manager. And you want to make sure that you do this, it's usually about 30 days, I'd say maximum 45 days after the last contact with the client, because, you know, you as a QMHS and the agency are responsible for that client if they go out and rob a bank or something like that. You know, the police, the lawyers, whoever is going to come in and say, well, you know, why weren't you seeing Susie Q? She's on your, you know, well, I didn't, she never responded to me. Well, you should have discharged her, kind of a thing. And within that too, you know, there should be documented attempts in the chart to re-engage that client. You know, a non-billable note saying, you know, I called Susie Q on this date, left a voicemail. I sent Susie Q a letter on this date saying, please call me if you want services. And then making sure a copy of that letter ends up in the chart so that we know, okay, yeah, you really did send that letter. So on average, again, every agency does it differently. On average, most people give it about 3 tries. It's usually a couple phone calls, a letter. I did one where I worked at an agency where it was, you got 2 phone calls, a letter, and a random visit, see if you were home, kind of a thing. And if there was no response to that.
Say that one again. I'm sorry, Shani. What did you say? You worked at an agency, they did what now?
So you got 2 phone calls. A letter that was sent, and then it depended on comfort level too of the case manager, but just a quick kind of like drive. I hate saying drive by, but a drive by, like, hey, are you home? Like just a random, are you home? Hey.
Right, just to show that you actually attempted to try to
Exactly. And all of that has to be documented in the chart, because the other thing that, you don't want is just okay, well, you discharged this client. Well, where were the attempts to re-engage them in services kind of a thing, especially knowing the population that we work with. So again, every agency is a little different, but on average, it's about 3 tries before you, have a discharge. Tiffany, did you have a question? I see your little hand raised there.
I do.
Yes.
So one of my questions is, if you're working with someone and you're saying, like, if you can't get them to engage in interaction, what if it's just they participate, but they're just not giving anything to you, giving any update, giving any feedback? Would that still fall under the direction of the discharge summary? Like, would you discharge a client at that point if they're not willing to work with you after several attempts, or maybe seeing if there's an option for a better fit for them?
Yeah, so I would suggest, having definitely rope your supervisor into, this, but it could be a discussion with, okay, maybe I'm not the best fit as a case manager. Maybe we can find somebody else. Do we need to change the treatment plan to, work on a different goal so that you engage? But, I have discharged people because they're just not participating, but you don't want to just do that automatically. You have to try to put some interventions and things like that in place first to see if there's something that can be done so that they do start participating. I often found the people that I discharged were generally teenage boys that didn't want to be in counseling or didn't want to be in services and things like that. So they just wouldn't participate. Like, they'd meet with me, but we would just sit and stare at each other for like an hour. So, yes, you would definitely also want to discharge someone for non-participation, but that would be something that you would want to do as not necessarily like a last resort, but you'd want to try some other interventions first prior to just discharging them.
Hey, Sean.
Thank you.
In that discharge summary, if I heard you correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, did you say that if they're not responding to the treatment plan or the what I want to say, the treatment plan or any of the, activities within the session, and you're going to discharge them for that, those things have to be mentioned in that discharge summary, so that it makes sense why you're discharging them for, not interacting? Okay. So I would think it would make sense if I'm going to say, hey, I'm discharging John Doe because he's not following his treatment plan. I need to show how I try to effectively, keep him on that and show that he just wouldn't be on it. So we're kind of wasting our time, so to speak, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And you're still, with any discharge summary as well, you're going to be giving a reason for discharge if it's unsuccessful. So, despite several documented attempts and charts, client did not respond to QMHS and therefore is being discharged. Despite changing the treatment plan, giving a new worker, blah, 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 client did not participate in activities and therefore is being discharged. So, yep.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Let me see if I can get back to, so as I was kind of saying too, just making sure that once you do decide to discharge a client, you should really do the discharge summary as soon as you can, because you don't want to be liable for that client anymore, especially, people who might be higher risk and things like that. You know, I remember I discharged a client once when I was working in a school, and like a week later he assaulted a teacher, and I was like, well, not on my caseload anymore. I got nothing to do with this. Sorry, I discharged him last week. So, and had I waited, I would have been like, oh crap, that was on me. So definitely want to do that as soon as possible. And discharge summaries are probably one of the easiest documents you will do as a case manager. So they maximum maybe 15 minutes. So it's not something that takes a long time. So again, your basic components of a discharge summary, the progress, some referrals, and how you would recommend any further treatment or symptoms to look out for. That's all a discharge summary is. Does anybody have any questions about documentation? I'm going to give you guys like a little, probably like 5-6 minutes to kind of get up and stretch, get a drink of water before we go into ICA notes. Give me time to get logged in and stuff like that. All right, so my clock says it's about 12:25. I would say come back around like 12:30 or so. I want to make sure that we end on time and things like that. So I'm gonna stop recording and stop sharing and get ICA notes all set up and stuff like that. And I will see you guys back here shortly.